Have you ever wished that there was a way to protect your organs, glands, tissues while they heal? Like giving your thyroid, your adrenals, or your immune system, kind of like a bodyguard to help protect you while you work on the root cause. Well, today we are
Hmm.
talking about something unusual that a lot of people get confused and they want to know more about. So, Dr. Vrzal and I have decided to tackle something called protomorphogens, something that could be helpful for something like called a long hauler situation or for all kinds of situations. Welcome, everybody, to Truth or Trend. This is the holistic breakdown where Dr. Vrzal and I have a little chat. We talk about some of the things that we feel are important, everybody should know about, and determine whether or not it's something that is worth investing your time, your energy, your resources into. And today,
Right.
we really want to let you know about something that we've both used for many years and found tremendous help in so many ways, and that is the PMG. I like to call it smart tissue support. Dr. V, what do you think? Tell us why everybody should know more about these and
I, I
your experience with them.
I might use that smart tissue support. I like it.
Yeah, me
I always call them genetic rebuilding materials,
okay. Okay.
right? And so it's kind of the genetic breakdown of the gland or organ. And I think we really need to kind of up front throw in the factor of heat because that's a lot of what is identifying and unique to the protomorphogen or PMG products. So those of you that are listening that are unfamiliar, in the product line, they're called PMGs. It could be cardiotrophin PMG. It could be thyrotrophin PMG. There's glandular products, these PMGs for just about every gland or organ, right? That we can use. And so we will talk about how some of these different ones are used. But I like to talk about the egg paradigm as well, because the way the heat that is used on an egg changes the way that it behaves, and it changes the protein structure of that egg. So if we eat a hard-boiled egg, the immune system recognizes that as a hard-boiled egg. If we eat a sunny side up or soft-boiled egg, the immune system recognizes it as a soft-boiled egg. So it's actually triggers the immune system in a different way. So we're not going to be so prone to become allergic to it. So it's the same thing with these PMGs, the protomorphogens. Royal Lee, back in the day when he extracted them and figured out how relevant they were, he realized that heat destroyed the protein structure of those glands or organs. And so that's really part of what is unique or sets these products apart, is because they have found a way to kind of vacuum dry them and not apply heat to those protein structures so that they are still identical to the gland or organ that we're trying to heal and rebuild. And so that, again, just to help kind of set them apart in that fashion, because there are other companies that make glandular products like this, but often there's heat applied, which changes that protein structure and is going to denature, if you will, or change the function of it and not give us that genetic rebuilding aspect to the gland or organ that we're really looking for with this product. So that just kind of want to put that up front, that is a part of what again makes these products unique. Then we've got the function you're about to talk about and applying it. Go
I think it's a
ahead.
great point to start. I mean, of course, we can take off in any direction, but what you're reminding me of is the story of Pottinger's cats, right?
Right.
I don't think a lot of people realize that when they heat things, that it absolutely changes the way that the body expresses it or receives it and what it can do with it. And that's such a good point about protomorphogens because a lot of people think they can get the same value from a glandular or just eating the glands of certain things. And there is value in that. But this is
Right.
specifically different. This is a nucleic extract of the specific organ, cell, or tissue, or whatever it is that you have a PMG for. And
Hmm.
that heated point is so important. I'm so glad you brought that up. And for those of you
Yeah.
who don't know who Pottinger is, or Price and Pottinger were, these are gentlemen
Was.
were, right? Yeah, Pottinger's cats is a whole different story, but the whole point was just heating, right? Just heating the milk and the food changed the cats tremendously. And after three generations of just, I think it was just one third of their diet being,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
couldn't even reproduce. So that,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm just distilling it to the fastest way possible to say
Hmm.
there
Hmm.
is a big change when you're heating things versus eating them raw or, letting that heat change what's happening in them.
And if that is of interest to you, I did have that video, 9-minute video digitized, and it is on my YouTube channel of Pottinger's cats,
Oh, okay.
showing how they all end up with osteoporosis and infertile and allergies, and they've got graphic pictures of these cats with these total allergy eyes and so on. It's pretty profound.
Yeah.
And then going back to, you said nucleic acids, just wanted to remind people nucleic acids is DNA. That's the N of DNA, your building blocks, your whole structure of your body, right? And the genes that you're, sharing with your kids and so on. So this is that genetic structure, the nucleic acid, DNA, of
Yeah.
of how we're regenerating tissue. So I kind of wanted to throw a curveball and talk about a virus that was very prolific over the last few years.
Go for it. Go for it.
And that virus was a retrovirus. There's different, like cold and flu virus, I call it DNA virus. That affects that NA, that part, that affects the body in a little different way than the RNA, ribonucleic acid, that we all got shut down for. Trying to protect our ratings here.
Right. Right. Okay. I'm with you.
So that changed the structures of glands or organs, and in my experience, it tends to be whatever the weaker link was at the time of infection, if you will. And so, if we're beat down and the adrenals are completely compromised, then we get exposed to that retrovirus. Then it's going to compromise the adrenal glands, and so we would need that PMG to rebuild those adrenal glands. If the thyroid was already compromised, or there was medications or things that are compromising the way the thyroid function, then that virus is going to compromise the way the thyroid would function. Or if the heart was compromised, then it's going to compromise the way the heart functioned. I had a kid in 20, I don't know, 25 or something, that, was told he had, heart problems and was not allowed to ascend more than 900 feet because of the strain on his heart, and he couldn't work and couldn't do anything.
Um,
Fortunately, my office was right up the coast from where he lived, and so he didn't have to ascend to get there. Put him on protomorphogens, and within a week he was back to normal function. And that, the allopathic profession said, "Oh, the diagnosis must have been wrong,"
sure.
because
Sure.
nobody
Yeah.
gets well that way, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, and that was cardiotrophin, the heart PMG material, to rebuild and get his heart back on track, stop that virus from continually damaging that heart in that case. So that is, in my experience, what the whole long hauler, the continued symptoms after an infestation, after an infection of a virus like that, those are long hauler symptoms, depending on what gland or organ is being attacked. So like when this the shutdown was going on, everybody's calling the office, what's the protocol for for this virus? I almost said it. What's the protocol for this virus? And I was like, it depends. What was your weak link? Was it your lungs? Was it your brain? Was it your thyroid? Was it your adrenals? Liver? There's PMGs for each of these glands and organs that we need to use. That is the basis of any, in my practice, the basis of any long hauler protocol.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and autoimmune too. I mean, this is where you were teaching in a 12-hour seminar on autoimmune, and that's when you really, really brought this to a lot of practitioners' awareness, the importance of having to have some level of this in there. And I think a lot
right,
of people's question is, well, if this is so great, how come, all the doctors in the world aren't using it? But it's not
right,
medicine, right? It's not something that is prescribed. It's something that there's a proprietary way that these are produced, and there's only one company in the world that makes them, to my knowledge, at this point, right?
right, right.
And I think if I'm going to encourage anybody, it's just the profound amount of clinical experience that I've seen from so many practitioners who have access to this has been
Hmm.
such a game changer that alone should encourage you to at least try it, right? And add
Hmm.
it to your
Hmm.
life a little bit,
Hmm.
because there's so many things that are challenging our bodies, so many things. And I
Right.
think a lot of rapid aging and things that are happening to people is they don't have a means to protect certain organ cells and tissues in our body. And I truly believe this is a huge piece to slow down aging and help, reverse
Right.
it, even in some cases
Sure,
for a
sure.
lot of people.
They have dermatrophin for the skin,
Right.
which is also the intestinal lining. The intestines are basically skin, right? So when we think dermatrophin, that's also healing, rebuilding the gut. And which brings us back to, as you brought up, the autoimmune issue. Autoimmune, in other words, the body attacking itself, attacking like self, autoimmune is starts with an intestinal compromise, right? So that intestinal barrier, that's a single layer of cells between between the poop and the blood, right? And so we don't want the poop in the blood.
Right.
So, right. And so if that intestinal lining gets compromised, we get stressed out, we get toxic metals, sugars, yeast, things like that open the gaps, if you will, in that intestinal lining, then these toxins slip through the intestinal lining into the bloodstream, and that's the proteins that then launch this attack, this autoimmune attack against your glands and or organs. So if it's the weak protein that slips through that intestinal line, in other words, it doesn't get broken down far enough or properly into, smaller amino acids, that protein gets into the bloodstream and causes the body to say, hey, this is foreign material, starts attacking it, and that the thyroid is the same protein structure as the wheat, for example. So then we start attacking the thyroid because we have consumed a product got into the bloodstream that triggered the immune system to attack ourselves, create an autoimmune condition. There's
Absolutely.
there's examples like that. I mean, corn does that for me as a B blood type. Corn, that if undigested corn slips through the protein, of course, we're not talking about eating a full corn kernel getting into the bloodstream, but
Right.
right, that amino acid structure will cause MS for the B blood type. That like I talked about wheat for the thyroid. There's all these triggers. There's a whole list of viruses that are the triggers for symptoms like ALS and MS and Sjogren's and all these autoimmune conditions. There are known triggers for them that got through the intestinal lining and launched this whole attack that we need to back down. We need to provide the body with healthy tissue, which in this case is these protomorphogens, so that the immune system says, okay, the war is over. Stop attacking your own body.
I think that's a really good point. I think so many people are confused at what autoimmunity is in the first place. They think that the body has just decided to attack itself, right? They think that they really don't. They just kind of take out this whole like possibility of there being a cause that could be addressed, right? And could stop this. And they think that once they have it, people with lupus think, oh, that's it. That's, for the rest of my life. But my body's just going to do this thing. And I had the same story. I've had several people with lupus who, after working with them and definitely using protomorphogens, they went back to their doctor, and their doctor said, "Oh, you don't have it anymore. We must have misdiagnosed you." Right? That's always their answer, because they don't know that it's possible. And that's
Right.
why I want to make this video to to people know that this is something that should be foundational for, well, in the world we live in today. If you truly want to be healthy, you do need to have some level of understanding and addressing these. And maybe I take it a little too far, because I have a system where I go through all of them over the course of a year, right? Just
Wow.
that I'm addressing. Um, but I don't know. I mean, how do you use them yourself personally? I mean, are you constantly taking them, or usually taking them? Or?
I'm more, as you know, condition specific, specific to a person's individual needs. I tend to try to err on the lower dose side. But yeah, I mean, in an acute situation, I'll have them taking six for typically a week, couple weeks, to get started and then taper down. But on the lupus thing, I've had 4 staff members that are all now lupus negative, over the years. So I don't know how I attract these lupus adrenal people to my office, but this is all people that were on the team that are now negative, and same thing. They were told that it's, this is the way it's going to be, and there's nothing you can do. So there's always something we can do, and there's always a lifestyle aspect that can be affected,
Right.
positively, to reverse these kinds of things.
And now, not to say that there is a protocol for lupus, right? Because
Right,
it's dependent on the person. But when
right.
you are working with those people, you mentioned more the adrenal protomorphogen, or were you using the
Yes.
same protomorphogen, or both?
Adrenal, yeah. Adrenotrophin PMG is my starting point for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Because I've had a lot of recently, a lot of people using the adrenal protomorphogen for sleep. This has been a huge thing. So many people, so many doctors that I've talked to who weren't getting good enough sleep, I suggest they try taking a couple before bed. And it has changed the depth of their sleep. The people who use Aura rings are reporting that they're getting more deep sleep. They're getting better sleep. It's just
Awesome.
protecting those adrenals. And I think
Mhm.
that's really important to know, because we, as a society, live as though our adrenals are 8 times larger than they actually are, right? Or
Serious.
more. um,
That's me.
That's amazing, right? So yeah, for a season, I recently did go through a bottle of the adrenal promotion, or adrenotrophin PMG, and I definitely noticed a better recovery, more sleep. We were just talking about
Mhm.
recovery.
Mhm. Mhm.
When I get to my office in the morning, I take something called Simplex M for men, which is 1/4 of that. The rest of it helps support your pituitary, your thyroid, and your orchic glands as well. So
Mhm.
I am making sure that I'm keeping some kind of level of protection in there over time.
Yeah. And taking the adrenotrophin at night begs, shines light on the fact that it's not stimulating. So we're not
Right,
talking about, giving caffeine to the adrenals or
right, right.
something to whip them into, producing that they're already exhausted. So this is genuinely a rebuilder. So that's why we can get away with taking an adrenal product at bedtime and actually sleeping better
Yeah.
instead of, getting wound up and staring at the ceiling all night. Right. So very different mechanism than what most people would consider, for an adrenal product that, they would think of as a stimulator, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then speaking of mechanism, I think that's something that people get a lot of confusion on, right? They want to know
hmm
why they work or how they work, and there's a lot of debate out there over this,
hmm
quite
hmm
honestly.
hmm hmm
And I tend to favor Mark Anderson's explanation of this. Mark Anderson's a person who's worked with the company who created them for longer than the creator at this point, by the way. He's been with this company called Standard Process longer than Dr. Royal Lee has. And he explains it very simply, like if there's a jet fighter, right, that's flying and there's a heat-seeking missile going after it, he says that heat-seeking missile is like the auto antibodies in your blood, and the jet shoots out these flares for the heat-seeking missile
Heat-seeking missile.
flares instead. And he says that there's a portion of it. It's not 100%, but a portion of it is like these flares that buy you time for repair in the body. And I like that. It's understandable. It's
hmm hmm
that protection because, like you said, there are other reasons why we're creating these antibodies. We just need time to heal the tissue so that the autoantibodies aren't tearing it down while we're trying to rebuild it, basically. And that's what
Very
one of
nice.
the biggest things that these things do. Would you agree with that? I mean, I think,
Yeah, yeah, I agree 100%. And it's really kind of when we look at the history of these things, it's pretty amazing that Royal Lee back in the day, before they even had microscopes strong enough to look at DNA, the DNA was unknown at that point when he created, realized that he could see the way cells functioned, that if they heated the product, then the cell didn't function quite right. And so he, figured out these ways to, extract without using heat to use the products, in this case, the PMGs. Now they've come so far that SP's show. I've seen some videos. I don't know if you've seen these on the microRNA, and
yeah,
and so microRNA is basically like the scissors that break the protein into these little structures, which determines their function. And so the PMGs basically break the proteins into the appropriate size structures, in the appropriate sequences, so that then as they replicate or as they go into the body to heal, to stop the heat-seeking missile, send out a signal to stop the heat-seeking missile. So now we can actually see it in these electron micrographs, and see the actual function. What has it been, 100 years since Lee, figured this out without the actual technology to understand what was going on at that time. It's been proven out now. It's just pretty amazing when you look at it that way.
it's absolutely amazing. And the thing is there's been so many practitioners just using them, not really knowing how they work, but knowing that they are providing protection, that they're providing healing. There's healing
Yeah.
that's occurring that wouldn't have happened without it, right?
Right,
So
right,
that's the
right.
thing. And of course, you and I love to know that things work, but of course, we want to know why they're working. And
hmm
but I think I would encourage everybody to think about, putting these into your life. I think it's important to point out that the company who makes these are usually in a smaller bottle. They only have one that they do in a larger bottle that's a standalone, and that's the one for thyroid, right?
Right.
That what that gives us an indication of is that so many people have figured out, right? They need a lot more thyroid protection. And I have personally seen so many people with, thyroid Hashimoto's and all of these high levels of thyroid antibodies actually get back to a level where it's not considered even a disease state. And I
Yep.
have to attribute that to the application of these protomorphogens as a protector. I'm not saying it's 100% it, but I'm saying
Mhm.
a piece of it. What do you think about
No, before I learned how to, and you said I teach a 12-hour autoimmune seminar. Before I had a way to test the autoimmune conditions decades ago, thyrotrophin PMG used to expire on my shelf because I didn't really know how to use it at the time. And then when I started testing for autoimmune, I got now can't keep it on the shelf, and it's going through it like crazy. I mean, one of my favorite examples of this is a gal that used to work at an endocrinologist at 6 hours away from me. She worked at an endocrinologist who was testing her antibodies. She would drive down 6 hours down the coast to come see me to get thyrotrophin, and her antibodies would be down. I mean, we've got lab after lab where she would slip and be off of the thyrotrophin, or you know did whatever she did, that her antibodies would go back up, and then we put her on thyrotrophin. Antibodies go back down to normalized levels, and her endocrinologist was open-minded and was into it, but never I'm like, just have her get an account, you know, get it in the office where she works. And I mean, it's a fun story. I mean, that gal's now, a mom, and just came in with her son the other day. I mean, we had been doing that dance for 15 years with this girl.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
right.
I'm sure you have all kinds of other stories. I mean, I've
Yeah. Mhm.
personally been taking them myself, and the change. I think, I can't think of anything else that can support the parotid glands like they do, right? For example,
Right.
people don't think about that. With all the
So
heavy
pro
we have.
Yeah, you just said it. So Prada is going to be active. The older people that now our age group, my age group, that had mercury fillings. Hopefully they're not being as used as much in the younger generation. But yeah, that's huge for and people that have had that parotid gland taken out.
Yep.
Klinghardt found that the parotid is a big part in brain detoxification. So
Mhm.
these people that don't have a parotid gland actually don't get that same detoxification cleansing of the brain at night. So another use of that parotid gland that you brought up is a great example. You
Yeah.
know, mercury's in our fish, and in the environment, it goes on and on. Speaking
Yeah.
of going down that road a little bit, the thymus gland is the one that I use a lot of.
Great.
Is that where you were about to go?
No, please. Yeah. Let's talk about the thymus.
But
Because that's the other thing. A lot of people don't think that they can do anything to regenerate it, right? They've been taught forever that after
mhm.
you're 8 or 12 years old, it just kind of disintegrates into nothing,
Right,
right?
shrivels up.
Right. Find it interesting to note now all of these peptides that people are injecting, right, and getting these profound healings, the TB 500, these
Mhm,
would have been created in the thymus. So I think
mhm,
one of
mhm,
the main reasons that people are having such a dramatic effect to that is because they haven't supported their thymus gland at all for.
mhm.
So talk about the thymus PMG in your experience.
Yeah, so I mean, Rachel's a great story on this. Is the gal came to me and she was about 22, wasn't able to drive and she was in a wheelchair because her legs literally did not work. She could not stand on her own. She had had her thymus removed as a child. She had the big, the scar and so on. And I treated her a couple of times. She went away to some Mayo Clinic or something for a couple of weeks to figure this thing out, and came back and I'm like, okay, whoo, what did we learn? What's going on? They said she had she comes back with the diagnosis. She has a myoneurojunction problem. I'm like, okay, so the nerves aren't telling the muscles what to do, and what did they do about it? Fortunately, they didn't load her up on a bunch of medications or anything. They just sent her away with a diagnosis, and
Mhm.
nothing doing, if you will. And so I took that information, looked at, muscle tested out to figure out what was compromising that connection between the nerves and the muscles. And it turned out that it was an autoimmune attack stimulated by sesame seed of all things. And so the sesame seed was that protein structure that was launching the attack. We had her on a bunch of thymus tissue, rebuilding the thymus gland. We'll talk about that in a second. But took her off of sesame, and within a week she was standing, came back, got driving herself out of her wheelchair, and all good. About a month later, she went out to sushi. Had a little sesame on the outside of the roll, and her legs were wobbly again. She's like, "Okay, lights on. I get it."
Yeah.
So yeah, and so I mean, so then we'll talk about the thymus. But again, great story. She's now married, two kids, and living the dream and doing fantastic. So basically, the thymus, I call the thymus the tagging mechanism for the immune system, right? So it creates these APCs, antigen presenting cells, right? So it tells the body, hey, this is a virus, this is a toxic metal, you need to go to work on it. So the thymus sets all that up. But the thymus gets compromised and suppressed by things like aluminum. Think vaccines, right? So back in the day when our peers, the alternative health arena, said mercury was the poison in immunizations. They didn't take it out. They reduced the mercury and added aluminum. So now we have two metals in those immunizations that, and with aluminum suppressing the thymus, now the thymus isn't tagging things to alert the immune system that there's work to be done here. So if somebody's needing to have or recently exposed to a vaccine like that, thymus PMG is really what I'm starting with. Get them loaded up at least the week before, a couple months afterwards to bind up the aluminum, keep that thymus working for damage control ultimately in worst case scenario.
One thing I want to just kind of point out and just think about a little bit is that I know that there's this 2 week period of time that you want to think about. You want to clear them out, right? And it can take months to get
hmm
these
hmm
repaired and regenerated. But once you get it to a balanced point, I think you can do a maintenance where you're only addressing it once every 2 weeks, because it takes about 2 weeks for these antibodies to be fully created, right? And as long as you're getting them and addressing them every 2 weeks, you should be
hmm
able to keep them where they're at. Do you find that consistent with the people that you're working with?
Yeah, I find rebuilding the thymus for the most part, once we get it to a healthy functioning level, it's going to be functioning fairly well. And then, yeah, depending on assault, I realized that cortisol, stress hormone, suppresses secretory IgA, suppresses the thymus gland, right? So, which is probably a lot of why, that it's the allopathic profession says that it shrinks and shrivels up as we, get into our teens. We got all the hormones going on, and cortisol, stress of starting to grow up, if you will, suppresses and ultimately can potentially shrivel up that thymus gland. So yeah, we need to modulate cortisol, keep that going. Uh, all that to say, you could have a stressful event that's going to suppress that thymus again. That would be the time that I would typically add the thymus PMG back in, or an immune challenge, which is a stressful event, to, rebuild the thymus gland to get that going.
In your muscle testing, what are you finding as a dose consistently that people are responding to with the protomorphogen? Are you doing it
If
once
we're
a day, twice a day, 3 times a day, and how
I'm
many?
doing a couple of times in a typical scenario. I'm simply 2 tablets a day is enough, for a
It's
150 pound
amazing, right?
person.
It's amazing how much
Right, right,
things will
right,
do.
right, right.
Yeah.
But if there's been a recent assault, of Vax or something that's loaded with the aluminum, then I might be looking at 3 twice a day for initial encounter. But that's fairly rare. More often than not, and if the vax was months and months ago, I'm just looking at 2 for 6 week period or something along that way.
And do you find that on an empty stomach that it is more important? Because that is another thing that I've kind of
Mhm.
gleaned from what I've heard from Mark Anderson and the way I understand it, that you want to kind of take them away from meals because you don't want to just digest them as a protein. You want them to be able to have their moment away from food to be able to do what they need to
Right. And if we really want to augment their performance, I'm a performance junkie. If we want
do.
to augment their performance, chew them up, right? And so there's RNA receptors, again, RNA again, here we are on the tongue. And so if you chew them, they're going to have a salty kind of taste because they are almost like cell salts, if you will, but they're, genetic rebuilding material, genetic material, salty tasting. Anyway, chew them up. That tells the brain, via those RNA receptors on the tongue, hey, this is what's coming, take this nucleotide to the thymus or take it to your adrenals, that way. So, I mean, there's a reason God put our tongue right next to the brain. you know, we want that mechanism we want the body to know what to do with, if we chew up a carrot, it says, hey, vitamin A is coming, let's
Yeah.
go get these eyes working,
Right.
that kind of thing. So there's a lot of benefit and value that way. So yes, typically for me, if we can, patient compliance is going to work. If we can get them to chew it, I would say take two. If it absolutely, can't stand the taste, swallow them. At least you'll get the product in there. So yeah, I'm typically recommend them a bit before food. I want it to be the first thing to go through the stomach, get maximum absorption through there.
I try to give
No
them at least
competition.
15 minutes before food. One of the
hmm
things that you and I talk a lot about too is optimizing our workouts, right? Our pre-workout and our post-workouts. So
hmm
I have been experimenting with one cardiotrophin for muscle, right? All the
hmm
muscle, and one
hmm
pneumotrophin for my lungs pre-workout.
hmm
And I
hmm
say that I definitely can tell the difference on the days when I remember to take just one of each before
hmm
the workout, about 10 minutes before the workout, honestly. Or
Yeah.
what do you think? Have you ever experimented with that? Thought about
Yeah, so when on my road riding days, when I'm forced, if you will, to ride around cars and traffic,
it?
breathing exhaust, then I find that I get a bit of a cough, later in the day when I do that. So I'm typically taking a lung supplement on those days and fairly regular. And when the lungs are compromised, sleep is going to be disrupted between 3 and 5 in the morning. So if a person's waking up, they're, restless during those hours, there's another, sign that your lung is compromised. You could do well potentially to take a supplement like pneumotrophin PMG. Again, if there was a virus that damaged those lungs, that's a time to take those for sure. Weakness in the shoulder, the deltoid muscle, and the serratus anterior muscle. The serratus anterior is that swimmer's muscle that moves the shoulder blade to get us past, if we can't get past 90 degrees here, that's the serratus anterior muscle stuck. That muscle gets weak and compromised when the lung is not functioning right.
So you're saying people who can't do this probably need
Yeah.
the pneumotrophin PMG, or should try
Right.
anyway and see.
Yeah, it's worth a try.
Yeah, because that's the other question that we get on here. Are they safe to use? Here's the question that actually has been asked for autoimmune conditions. Are they safe for
Wow.
autoimmune conditions?
Yeah. You want to answer that? Or I'd say they're
Well,
contraindicated not to use them.
right. Well, what I would say, here's where people get confused with them sometimes, because part of what can happen is you can get a histamine response, but that is the neutralization of the autoantibody, to my understanding. So if you do have a high level of antibodies in the blood and you take a whole bunch of these, say 5 or 6, your body may feel like it's having an allergic reaction to it, but that's just your body, dealing with the autoantibodies. Oftentimes people will have what they think is an allergy, but that's actually something I want to intentionally tell people. If this happens, that's probably a good sign. It also means that you're not methylating very well and you're not clearing histamine very well. You can do it. Gives us a lot of
Yeah.
information, right?
Right.
But they should be aware, right, that they can have a response, but that is an appropriate response if they have an overwhelming experience with that. But other than that, safety issues, I mean, can you think of anything about them that wouldn't be safe?
Yeah, I mean, it's food ultimately when you look at it. It's, it's like, are eggs safe? Is chicken safe? Is beef safe? It basically is what it is that it's the glandular, beef is the muscle, right? I mean, that's basically, if you will, the PMG of the cow muscle.
Right?
Right? So, yeah, I mean,
I think a better
I
question is it
can.
safe to live in this world without taking them, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I mean, we all need help. And so it's going to keep the immune system stable, balanced. Again, the beauty is there's a product for every gland or organ, pretty much. So uh, you use it based on what your innate weakness is to get rid of that weakness.
Yeah, I mean, everybody out there who's listening should know, if you're not familiar with them, there's one for the brain, there's one for the eyes, pituitary, your hypothalamus, your like we said, your lungs, your liver, your kidneys, your
Gonads, uterus. There's protocols, speaking of uterus, if you had a hysterectomy, partial hysterectomy, often you'll want to do the PMG for the gland organ that's not there anymore. So there's that.
Mhm, mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have enough time to really go into this, but I think this was served as a way to kind of hopefully introduce it to people in a way that they feel comfortable adding these in,
Mhm.
looking at using them, knowing that if something isn't working in your life, maybe you need this as the extra protection to be able to get you over whatever healing hump that you're not able to get over. And
Right.
I mean, over the years, I mean, I can't tell you how many stories. I mean, it's just there's so many of people how this has been the game changer for them that I think everybody should at least have a knowledge of and an awareness of them. They're ones for the bone as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Autostrophin PMG. Yeah. So, I mean, the mechanism could have been as simple as a gal eating corn caused an ovarian cyst, so there was damage to the ovary. Now she needs to take Ovotrophin PMG to heal up that glandular organ, put it back on track, which is going to manifest as tennis elbow, lateral elbow pain, pain in that glute medius. So we're going to cover, some of these very specific glands and organs as we go through, Truth or Trend and cover different subjects like we talked about, headache, tension, excuse me, bitemporal hormone headaches. That person would be wanting to take Ovotrophin or Orchic PMG if they're male, which also is going to help from a fertility perspective and stabilizing periods. So, yeah, applications are endless.
Absolutely. Well, last question here, since we're running close on time, and I know you got a hard stop here. How long should somebody take these, a protomorphogen? That's a question that has been asked a lot. Like, how long Now, my answer is going to be, well, it depends, right? Are you pouring fuel on the fire and burning down the organ while we're trying to repair it? Right.
Right.
So the more you can do to remove the things that are causing the damage, the shorter the amount of time you're going to need them. But I have seen people where it's taken several months to be able to get their thyroid where it needs to be, right? Where it's no longer giving you indications that it's under an assault. So what is your answer for that? For how long?
Yeah, same. My challenge to the clinicians out there, you know, if they still need it, there's probably something in their life in the diet that needs to be addressed, right? So we talked about wheat and its attack on the thyroid. That's part of why that's such a profoundly common supplement, is because in America wheat sucks. I mean, this is unfortunate reality.
Yeah. Mhm.
Professional terms there, excuse me. But I mean, that's going to launch an immune attack against the thyroid. So, I mean, then we're going to have to keep taking it in that case. So it really depends on how beat down the gland or organ is. But, you know, the reality is if the fuel is not there, if we're not feeding the fire of that autoimmune attack, a couple weeks ago and after it should be enough to really kind of halt or calm down that autoimmune attack. Most of the time they need to keep taking, you know, maybe I typically would start a higher dose and then back it down after a week or two and do more of a, you know, 1 or 2 kind of maintenance dose, maybe for a month or two after, depending again on environmental issues.
Mhm. Yeah, and I don't think there's any reason to not try to address, you know, over the course of a relatively reasonable amount of time. Just take a little bit of them, right? Just
Yeah,
give your body a
right.
break. Just make sure you're
Mhm.
allowing. And that's, yeah, maybe I'm overdoing it, but right, I'm just over aware of how many things are challenging my body in this world, and I just want to
Mhm.
give myself a fighting chance. That's what.
Right. Absolutely. Be all you can be. Be your best.
There you go. There you go. Hey, all right. So, any last thoughts before we wrap this up? Because I know you got a hard stop and you got to get going.
Yeah, they're pretty safe products. I would say you're probably going to know if you know what you're looking for. You know, pains that if you're looking to heal your shoulder or your lung, you know, you should start seeing some change within days. So, I mean, again, you'll know whether you're getting value out of it within a few days, definitely within a week. So if not, then maybe you need to look at a different product or, you know, different area, different organ to treat. But yeah, and the potential side effects are almost nil. So I mean, pretty safe place to start.
All right. So those of you out there watching who are practitioners who've used them, please leave us some stories. Leave us a comment. Tell us about a success that you had because of this and how that was a change. If we missed something and you think it's important, leave us a comment. Let us know. If you guys have questions about something or if something we said didn't quite add up, right? Because we know what we said, we don't know what you're hearing. So it's
Good point.
comments. Let us know. Help us get better
Right.
at this, and we're going to keep these coming every week so that we can continue to keep this conversation going and make sure we're providing the best options for all the people coming to us for healing. And for those of you
Right.
looking out there too, bringing you the best options as well. All
Right.
right. Thanks everybody for watching, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Sounds good. Bye.